Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am such a big fan of today's guest. Most publications easily recognize him as one of the top subject matter experts in marketing and one of the top influencers today. Rand Fishkin is the CEO and co-founder of SparkToro, the previous co-founder of Moz and Inbound.org, who has dedicated his professional life to helping people do better marketing through the Whiteboard Friday video series, his blog, and his book, Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. And on this episode, we'll discuss life as a marketing entrepreneur, SEO, audience intelligence, Russell Wilson's contract, the evil empire of Google, why local coffee shops are the best, and how I can't remember who wrote Lord of the Rings. So let's tune in to the amazing Rand Fishkin with what I think is an amazing shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Rand, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. I know that most people in the marketing world have never heard of you. My recommendation would probably be that you write some best-selling books, learn some SEO, and maybe get out on the speaking circuit for some of that thought leadership. Have you considered that option?
Work, man.
I know you should. But in all seriousness, though, for the
slacking,
agreed. So in all seriousness, though, for the few people on the planet who don't know who you are, would you mind quickly giving us a recap on you and your career to date?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Kenneth.
Absolutely.
So I started a company called Moz, which is a software startup in Seattle, Washington, about 200 people, around 55 million in revenue. So I started that in 2004 with my mom, Jillian. Very unusual co-founder,
yeah.
Set mom and son. And initially as a consulting business, and then it became a software company. And we raised quite a bit of venture capital. I think the business has raised 29 million or so total to date. Mm-hmm. And it's, it's profitable. It's sort of growing, but slowly. And I stepped away from that business a year ago I published a book with Penguin Random House called Lost and Founder.
Yeah.
And that book has, done quite well and been very positively received, especially by a lot of entrepreneurs and folks who want to get into that world. And then started a company called SparkToro, which is in making software for audience intelligence.
So we'll talk about all those three, but I will bring up now at this point, I'd like to know, what is your favorite Izzy drink? You departed Moz with all of your office things in a large Izzy box that I saw on the site. And, and I wondered if that came from a box in the break room.
I like the classic cola flavor.
There you go.
So, I don't know if that makes me weird, but
no, it stood out as I was reading the news article at the time when it came out, and I found it again getting prepped for this interview. So I had always been a fan of you because of your work at Moz and now SparkToro and seeing you speak at a conference. However, I became a much bigger fan after reading Lost and Founder, your book from 2018 about being an entrepreneur. And it's, as you say, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. Just because my own background, that's where the celebrity of you really hit home as genuine for me. But this best-selling book came out, and I believe it still has a lot of legs. It has a lot of legs with the entrepreneurs that I know, and I've recommended it to a lot of them and to friends, other marketers, to read it, whether they're in the agency world or any type of company. But many of them have said, I've already read it and got it on my shelves. Yeah. Why do you think this book has resonated so well? Because it was a bestseller. Was it New York Times bestseller in 2018? Amazon
no,
bestseller?
I think it just missed. Yeah, I think it was on the Amazon and maybe USA Today or something like that. But I think the reason it resonates probably has to do with the fact that so few people who build companies, especially who build companies and raise capital, are willing to tell the whole truth.
Absolutely.
And I believe that's actually because of the incentive structures that, sort of the marketplace and capitalism more broadly provides us with, right? It basically is, hey, why would you, tell the truth about how venture capital works, tell the truth about how difficult entrepreneurship can be, potentially burn bridges with people you've worked with in the past or people you might work with in the future. Don't do that. Preserve the relationships by glossing over the bad parts and highlighting the good bits. And I do not do that.
No, not at all.
I did not take that advice. And so Lost and Founder is, I think, painfully honest is a really good description. My editor at Penguin, Nikki Papadopoulos, actually came up with that adjective, and I thought it fit just brilliantly, because the book is, I think for a lot of people, if you go on Twitter and you see people talking about it, right, they'll say like, gosh, I choked up reading this chapter about depression, or
Yeah.
I choked up reading this chapter about layoffs, or, gosh, I felt it so hard when you talked about nearly going bankrupt, in the early days with your mom. And um, I think that, that if I can help make people feel less alone
Yeah.
for the challenges that they go through, and help them see what this journey is really like, and hopefully, the book is also very lesson based, right? Hopefully help them avoid making the same mistakes that I made. Then I think it's a success.
I agree. To me, it's as much of a self-help book, especially because of the depression issue, which, a lot of us in the world deal with. I thought that was amazing. It's so few books on startups. I mean, they're 95% fluff and about 5% that, is bad, but they've glossed it over to where it looks still fluffy. And, yours is not that at all. And it's the same thing that you find in a lot of leadership books. I mean, I can tell you there are a lot of brilliant leaders who have a lot of baggage and everything else. And you open the kimono quite well in this, and show everything that people go through. So you write about all these failures and the learnings from them. Which do you think in your own career have you been the best at in your role of CEO and entrepreneur? And which do you think has been the worst for you? I mean, the biggest failures and learnings, is it the manager, the vision, the execution, or, the borrowing money? Is it work, your family? I mean, what have you done best with it that you've seen in yourself, and what was been the worst and biggest learning?
I think that like a lot of people, I think my greatest strength and greatest weakness are probably intimately tied together.
Sure.
Right? They are very difficult to disentangle, and that probably has to do with people and empathy. I think one of the things that I'm relatively good at is, if I spend time with a person, I can find something to connect with them on.
Yeah.
Right? I fundamentally like people. I see the best in them. I expect good things, and often am rewarded, by those investments in friendship and in time spent with people. I'm actually a deep introvert. Like, I need a lot of alone time to be able to summon the strength and energy to go spend time with people. But I also have a very active social life. And I think that is what helped me make great products and make a company that was, sort of identified a trend before anyone else entered that space, and, build up the SEO software world, kind of those initial 7 crazy growth years at Moz. I think that's what helped me form the relationships that led to raising capital and hiring people. And I think it's what also led me down a lot of poor paths, right? Kind of putting into place a structure in my company, and sort of around a lot of big decisions in my life with people. I don't want to say with not good people, but with people who maybe weren't up for the challenge, or with people who I did not create the right guardrails and boundaries, or oversight or process. I didn't create the right expectations for them. And as a result, I think that Moz didn't do what it could have done. It's a puttering along business, and it's doing okay, but I think it could have been, a breakout superstar in the marketing tech space. And I think that was also, part of my failures as a marketer, and as as someone who creates content and tries to distribute it and all those kinds of things. I think some of my Some of my failures have been investing in or alongside, again, I don't want to say wrong people, but maybe wrong structures, wrong processes, wrong types of partnerships.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well,
But you live and learn, right?
You live and learn.
Once you figure these things about yourself, then you can invest in improvement, right? It's sort of, I think that's the whole point of therapy, right? The therapy is not just there to identify why you do things that are, self-harmful or non-productive for you, but also to help you change that behavior.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
It's just
Can't
so
have one without
hard.
the other.
Agreed. It's just so hard to be a marketer, manager, visionary, executioner, good boss. I mean, you feel like as the boss, you have to be the executioner. I mean, but with laying off people, I know that was tough. I was a horrible boss. I could, because I'm such a driver, but I've never hired anybody or managed anybody that I didn't care about. I just didn't, you just learn to try to show it better the next time and to get more out of people. But it's just not hard. Also, it's not easy also when you're just trying to make a company grow so that some board of directors doesn't, move in a different direction.
This is, I don't know if have you ever had Kim Scott on the podcast from,
I have not.
From Radical Candor. So she wrote this, amazing book, Radical Candor.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think she does such a good job of is identifying this fundamental truth that in order to deliver great results as a manager, you have to care personally about someone and challenge them directly.
Absolutely.
And I think I was always good at the care personally part and never good at the challenge directly part.
Yeah. Yeah, flip the coin for me. So, but when Seth Godin, writes on the back, I really loved his comment, not just because I'm a fan of his, but as well. But when he writes about wanting to read it 30 years ago, that's means a lot. Of course, I think 30 years ago he had already finished about 30 other books at that point then too. So
probably.
But
me too, right? Like this is a book that I wrote kind of for my former self, like, hey, Rand from 2001,
exactly.
Read this book.
Yeah, exactly.
This will solve all your problems and mistakes you're about to make.
Well, SparkToro, where does the name come from? Where'd you come up with SparkToro?
So I wrote about this a little bit in a blog post. I actually have kind of a startup naming criteria that I really like. My favorite one, which my wife constantly comments on, we were just in Portland visiting some friends and staying at a hotel, and she was amazed. She's like, "Gosh, what I love about your new company name is you go to the front desk and the hotelier can say and spell the name properly."
Yeah.
when they check you in with the email address and all that. And that's in fact one of the things that drove me to it. But no, the name came from the fact that the domain name was available. That I really like Totoro, the Japanese cartoon, animation cartoon. And I wanted something that had no association with anything else, right? That could be anything. SparkToro could make, I don't know, pepperoni flavored snacks, right? And it could be
a Japanese tire company.
Yeah, it could be a Japanese tire company. It could be anything. Yeah. And so therefore it doesn't pigeonhole us into something, especially in the early stages when you don't know precisely where you're going to be and what you're going to have to pivot on. I think that is a wise move for startup founders.
Yeah, well, secretly I had read the blog. I've read a bunch of your blogs. I thought that would be a great story to share. Well, you're doing some interesting things with SparkToro by helping marketers, PR pros, entrepreneurial teams learn more about the audiences they want to reach. Describe what your approach and vision to this new company is. That's a whopping year old.
Yeah, that's right. Not quite a year, almost. So Kenneth, I am sure that you have faced this problem as a marketer. But actually, I kind of want to challenge you and ask this question and see if you got an answer. I've been asking a bunch of people this. So, in the market research or audience research process, right, as you're kind of figuring out, who's our target market, who's going to be our right customers, one of the things that you do in that process is figuring out where and to whom and to what your audience pays attention.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, oh, okay, we're going to go do marketing to reach this audience. Well, where are we going to reach them? Is it conferences and events that they go to? You know, can we figure out what those are? Can we figure out what YouTube channels they subscribe to? Can we figure out what podcasts they listen to? Can we figure out what websites they visit? Can we figure out who they follow on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram? Can we figure out if they subscribe to subreddits? Can we figure out like all these things, right? Where can we go reach our audience? And what is that called?
Audience targeting, I guess. I mean, audience intelligence.
So audience intelligence is what we've generally been using, but I think it's been an odd experience to sort of have this like, gosh, a lot of people do it. Not a lot of people have a name for it or a consistent name for it. But yeah, we felt like, you know, I've been helping a lot of startups.
So I'm a little biased, by the way, because I worked for Axiom, and so we called a lot of things audience targeting, you know, so apologies if I threw that one in. But no, that's great.
A good, I love that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so we, you know, and I'm sure you've done this as well, right? You help a bunch of startups with this issue, right? To try and find their audiences online and where can we go reach them. And it is an insanely frustrating, manual, time-consuming, inaccurate process, right?
You got to name that concept and make that familiar to them. I'm going to call it, here's an idea for you, SparkToroism.
Oh, wow. I love it.
Already trademarked.
But you know, that process is so painful and so manual. And a lot of folks, you know, they outsource it to an agency, right? They'll pay 20, 50 grand, run a large scale survey, or they'll do something like the GfK's MRI, like American Consumer Survey, and buy a segmented portion of that, or just extraordinary amounts of work. Why is it in an era when everybody is putting their information about what they follow and pay attention to out on the web via both websites and social profiles, why can't you just search for exactly the audience you want and see a list of what they pay attention to? It's all out there on the web. You just have to collect it manually. So, well, why can't someone aggregate that? That was our thinking behind SparkToro. Like, you and I started a lighting design company. We want to reach architects in Los Angeles. We should be able to type in architects, filter, Los Angeles, and see a list of, oh, here are the top 50 podcasts that they listen to the most. That should be at our fingertips. That data is out there on the web. You just have to crawl it and index it and you know, run the Venn diagram style calculation in the background. It should be done. That's what SparkToro is trying to build.
So how do you think that this will, I mean, I get completely how it's going to help brands and advertisers and agencies do that, but how do you think this will help the channels and influencers then elevate also? And the reason I ask this is, and I've thought of it recently on a different topic, but if it's only by social mentions or volumes of podcast plays, for example, if this podcast got 10 listeners as opposed to something else which got 10,000, completely making up numbers, the audience is much larger.
That's not the methodology.
Exactly. So how do we help fill in that gap, though, to show better content within a blog post that's more authoritative or provides better how-to knowledge and a deeper podcast that maybe has you talking about some subject? How are we going to help show that? I haven't figured out how to fill that gap yet.
Sure. So first off, let me disabuse you of the idea that we are going to show you things that are popular in a sector by their relative popularity. That is not the idea, right? The idea is to do essentially what election polling does.
Yes.
Where you go out and you say, okay, voters in Washington State, who do you prefer for, you know, this judge position? And here's these three candidates, and let's see, you know, which one is that? Well, you can go ask them directly, right? And election polling works fairly well, even with a small sample size, right? There's 12 million people in Washington State, but you only really need to ask 1,100 of them to have statistically significant confidence that you've got the right answer. And our system works similarly, but we don't ask. We just crawl the data. So we go out and crawl, you know, tens of millions of web and social profiles. So we'll go find, you know, Kenneth will go find your website. We'll link that to your podcast page. We'll link that to your Twitter profile. We'll link it to your LinkedIn account, to your Facebook account, to your Instagram, if your Facebook's account's public. If not, we won't crawl it. But all the public data that we can, your Instagram, your YouTube, whatever. And then we will take that and say, this is one profile, and this person is a, however they describe themselves. So all the information in your bio across those pages will sort of aggregate. Then we throw away all the personally identifiable information because we don't actually care, who you are, or what your name is, or any of that stuff. We just want to be able to index you against, tens of thousands of other people, well, tens of millions. And then, we go and search that database and say, oh, good, we have 4,100 people who've identified themselves as architects in our profile database. And of those, 700 are in the greater Los Angeles area. And of those 762 follow this podcast.
Yeah.
That podcast is very popular with architects in LA.
Brilliant.
That doesn't mean it's very popular overall. It just means it's popular with your exact audience that you want to reach.
So in the conversations that you're having with companies, the ones that are smart are going to get why this resonates. Is it from, at least what we talked about, how it's difficult to help explain that, but is it from brands that maybe just aren't doing enough of this audience insight and evaluation, or is it because they don't have clean data to start?
I mean, one of the challenges with SparkToro is because this isn't a sector that is well known and well covered and, sort of has lots of existing players, folks are
first in the space is not easy.
Right? Yeah, being first in space, right? Explaining like, no, we're not showing you the most popular podcasts that have architecture in the title. We are showing you the podcast that the most architects listen to.
And obviously a shark's perspective would be way at the top for whatever the topic was. So
Right, yeah.
Well, you talk about VC funding a lot in the book, with SparkToro at least. And being a company based out of Seattle, did you ever think about asking your neighbor, Russell Wilson, of the Seattle Seahawks, to be an investor? I hear that he received like a new bonus or maybe a slight increase in his pay. I mean, $140 million, and including a $65 million signing bonus, that could help funding a lot.
Yeah, I mean, two things are true. One, I am not totally sure that Russell is exactly the type of investor that we want. I'm sure he seems like a wonderful guy, but also, yeah, we did a very unusual type of funding, which I'm sure you saw.
Yeah,
and I'm super excited about that. One of the things that's true is we have spent, a very small portion of that money so far, and that's kind of the plan, right?
Yeah,
we wanted
great.
to have a really low burn. We didn't get an office space. We didn't hire anybody. We've kept costs super low in order to give ourselves a long time to nail this product and this market. So yeah, but I will say about Russell Wilson, that number really shocked me.
Yeah, it did me too.
And the highest paid player in the NFL, I don't know. I mean, he seems like a very solid quarterback. I'm sure that the Seahawks are, glad to have him. But if I were him, I'd have sort of said like, wait, can you still afford linemen after this?
Exactly.
Because I would really like some of those.
Yeah, and it's been 5 years since the Super Bowl win anyway, or several years anyway. So
yeah.
Switching in briefly to Moz, this predates Moz, but really, what was your interest, at least in your own career, with SEO? Is that an interest still peaked for you with typical SEO at all? With the typical on-page, off-page title tags, or is that interest heavily shifted into the audience intelligence world?
I would say I still have a lot of passion around SEO.
Yeah.
I just see it evolving in a way that it's that's not very friendly to the companies that I love the most. Right?
Yeah.
I love small businesses. I love businesses that are trying to grow but not trying to dominate their sector and become monopolies.
Yeah.
And I think Google is very friendly to monopolies and very unfriendly to small businesses, local businesses, medium businesses, startups, early stage entrepreneurs, I think that Google is becoming a less and less friendly place for those people, and a less friendly company overall. I had such high hopes in those first 10, 15 years when Google was building itself, that they really were not an evil corporation. And gosh, the things that they have done the last decade is just disappointment after disappointment, to the point where someone asked me on Twitter today, they said, like, hey, can't we assume, why don't you assume good intent about Google? Like, why does everything have to be they're
Yeah.
evil, they're manipulative? And my reply was 2 decades of experience. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
That after 2 decades of experience with Google, I really feel like the first decade I always gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I've been consistently disappointed. And the second decade, I've come to the realization that they are not good players. That doesn't mean they don't do good things.
Yeah.
They can still do wonderful things. They can still make some wonderful products. I think they can still be a net positive for the world in a lot of ways. But I don't think the way that they treat business owners and publishers and people who create content for the web is right. And so, yeah, that disappointment is certainly one of the reasons why I'm excited to get into something else.
Agreed. Well, just don't get pulled over, when driving through Mountain View. When and if you're there. So, one of my favorite blog posts of yours was, and I know I've read a lot of your SlideShare documents this year, but it was kind of your unpopular list of marketing trends for 2019. And first of all, yeah, I laughed my butt off because of when you describe how bad the trends were from the usual suspects. Because you accidentally, I think you described it as gas station hot dogs and nacho cheese bad. But first of all, I hate most of those yearly trends. I've been asked to write them before. I'm sure you're asked to write them every year. This year I posted one and one only trend for 2019. It was that Captain Marvel's outfit would be the #1 Halloween costume for little girls this year. And that's only because it makes about as much sense as the rest of the trends that are out there. But they still fill up the web.
Much more accurate.
It's more realistic. It's also funny to me that none of the trends ever come from typical but smart larger brands as well. It's a lot of people that seem like they have a profession to put out trends. But what sparked that blog with you, and in particular, we'd love for you to just elaborate, if you would, on that.
I think it's one of those situations where you do a Google search and you're sort of hoping to find some good information, right? So I did the marketing trends search because I'm putting together these presentations for the year about, addressing some of the big marketing trends, and going through them helped me not one iota, right? It made me, it's kind of like, there's a syndrome, I can't remember what it's called, or a paradox, where, you read the front page of the Wall Street Journal and it's about a topic that you know a lot about, and you realize that everything that's being written is surface level and wrong and inaccurate. And then you read the next page and it's about, some other topic that you don't know anything about, and you just believe the reporter, right? You forget that on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, you couldn't trust any of that information, and suddenly you believe this other article. And I had exactly that experience reading the front page of Google, right? The 10 results that were in there. And so I thought, hey, you know what? Rather than just bitch and moan and complain about this, I'm going to do something. I will write something that deserves to be there, right? Be the result that you want to see on the front page. And I don't think it actually ranks for marketing trends, but because I didn't actually put the work in to do the SEO. But it was a very fun post to write, and I think it rattled some cages in some good ways, hopefully making people think.
Absolutely. So you don't think voice, though, kind of elaborate, if you will, on what your views are on voice.
Yeah. So in the trends piece, I basically said, I don't think voice search is fundamentally any different than a typed search. And I don't think voice search is a trend that anyone should be, up in arms about or worried about or thinking about how they're going to deal with. Voice answers is a totally different world.
Mm-hmm. That's a great
and
point.
I think voice answers is where the actual change is happening. So when you see, Google come out with a number like, hey, 5% or 6% of all searches are being performed by voice now. That number is useless to you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me how many are being performed via voice. That's the input device. That doesn't matter at all. Tell me the number that are being answered by you, a machine speaking the query back rather than a page of results and an option for people to click on things. Though that's the fundamental difference. Voice answers is the actual trend we should be paying attention to, and there's no numbers around it. So we really have no idea, right? These companies don't release anything about, hey, here's how many voice answered queries our systems processed this year as compared to visual results displayed on a screen. So it's really hard to know.
It is, and I think it's again a good emphasis. I've had a lot of conversation with brands who are now starting to want to play in the space, and then they still don't spend enough time focusing on the importance of their brand, because if you can have a brand that is a synonym for the vertical you're in, it can make all the difference in the world. It's when people Google McDonald's instead of hamburger, and that's a horrible example because nobody would ever.
I think that's a good one.
But it's a well-known, or Starbucks for a coffee, in your neck of the woods. So
instead of you don't want people searching Google Maps for coffee shop.
Exactly.
You want them searching for Starbucks,
exactly.
And that is exactly, well, if you're Starbucks, right? If you're anybody else, that is the opposite of what you want. But I think that's a perfect example of the power of brand. And I would urge, and I do urge, marketers of all kinds to consider, hey, in the long term, brand matters more than any of these other tactics. And if you can find ways to reinforce brand loyalty, to get people to know you, like you, trust you, search for you, not for the generic, that is where you can win.
Well, and I joked with the SparkToroism, but per your point of the name, when you figure out what the definition of this is, and I'm again not the perfect analogy, but when you do SparkToro near me as opposed to Starbucks near me or coffee shop near me, people aren't putting in coffee shop near me. They're putting in Starbucks near me if they're putting in anything. Maybe in Seattle it's different because of the abundance of coffee shops you have, but in a lot of cities,
I think about
putting
this
in my near me, that's about as friendly as Google's gotten, is adding a near me. But if you know how to play the system right, then it just keeps the monopolies of the world up there.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the challenges, right? Is to try and make SparkToro synonymous with the type of technology and the type of data that we're providing, this sort of what we call audience intelligence, but as synonymous as Salesforce is with a sales-focused CRM.
Agreed.
Right, so that you don't think about like, oh, what do you use for your Salesforce? Oh, well, we use Salesforce for our Salesforce.
Yeah. Exactly. I've heard that question many times before. By the way, why do you dislike the Forbes Agency Council so much?
I mean, so I haven't spent a lot of time digging into, I don't know who the people are behind it.
Yeah.
But I did go through the category on Forbes's website, and I looked at, I don't know, the last 24, maybe 36 posts that were written by the council in quotes, and I couldn't find something that I thought was useful or valuable. And so I wondered why they created it. I don't know.
They went to Google.
I'm sure it drives traffic.
They Googled it,
but, wow.
and they created that, and that's why you ran into that same problem with nacho cheese and gas station hot dogs. So,
I mean, Google should be better than this, right? I think,
well,
in a lot of sectors they are, but oof.
Who are the entrepreneurs and marketers that inspire you today? I mean, whose books are you reading that help guide you and your company? Or are you just sort of on autopilot at this point, which I'm assuming is not true because I know you're a self-learner.
No, definitely not. Definitely not true. I got this great book in the mail. I think it was published by my publisher. So full disclosure, I did not pay for this, but I started reading it just because it was on my dining room table, and I freaking loved it. I thought it was so well done. And I don't know how popular it is. I hope it's getting popular. It's called No Hard Feelings. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not. Who's the author?
So it's this two women who wrote it together, Liz Fosslien and Molly West Duffy.
Yeah.
And my God, I mean, this is like the sleeper hit. It's just so it's called The Secret Power of Embracing Emotions at Work. Um, and I think it just captures it's great. It's sort of illustrated as well as text. So there's a lot of like little comics in there. I think one of the authors is an illustrator by trade, and yeah, it's sort of like a much better, more thoughtful version of Dilbert, and then
Right.
expounds on sort of how to solve all of these tough problems that people face in dealing with other people in their work, in work of all kinds, right? In agency work, in consulting, in on teams, in house, dealing with bosses, dealing with subordinates, dealing with teammates. It's excellent. I just loved it.
You've inspired a lot of people. If you had to, inspired a lot of marketers and entrepreneurs, especially. But if you had to think about it in your own career, being an entrepreneur with Moz and SparkToro, or as an author with one of your bestsellers like Lost and Founder, or speaking at the gazillion events all over the world that you speak at, or something else, which part of your own career do you think has had the most influence over you and your growth?
Ooh, gosh, over me personally.
Well, the reason I ask this is there are so many
Yeah.
marketers and wannabe influencers that really haven't paid their dues. There are a lot of
Mm.
people who want to start companies and don't realize the pain that you go through with it, or want to be speaking on stages but haven't written, amazing books that resonate all over, or
Sure.
other things. And a lot of times people just haven't paid their
I,
dues, and you have. I think it's more than evident, especially with your last book. You show it. Your how you left Moz showed, taught a lot of people things. And I'm just kind of curious, all those things, whether it's networking and speaking at events, or being an author, or being an entrepreneur, or just being a marketer in SEO, or influencer marketing, what do you think has had the most influence over you that way?
uh, I would say of all the sort of marketing and content focused things I do, the one that influences me personally most. I don't know that this necessarily means it is the most valuable thing that I do, but in terms of my personal growth, it is definitely speaking. And the reason is because the prep work that goes into uh, getting a deck together and being confident on stage and knowing your material inside and out, being ready to take questions, and then the process of delivering that talk, usually multiple times, and refining it and improving it each time, and having that Q&A with your audience, whether that's off stage or on, and then listening to other speakers, and then getting your speaking scores back and the feedback from the events. That process is extremely instructive.
I
That
could not agree more.
really helps upgrade you as a someone who amplifies ideas. And I do think as a marketer, as like a content marketer, it's not the best use of your time. It's not the highest ROI.
Yeah,
I can stand in front of the Whiteboard Friday camera for 10 minutes and produce a video that's going to be seen by 10 times as many people, maybe 50 times as many
absolutely.
people as a talk, and probably will influence a lot of them almost as much, but it does not upgrade me the way going to an event does.
I could not agree more. And to be honest, though, when you go there to any event and talk to anybody, it helps you, the speaker, learn,
Yeah,
just like the people that are in the audience who come there to learn for you. And that's
yeah,
something that 10 years ago, when I used to speak at a lot of different groups, I used to speak at colleges all the time. I got that feeling, and I learned it quickly, that it wasn't just them learning from me. I learned a lot more from them than they ever learned from me. And as long as I had that perspective, it's helped me become a better speaker. Now, that may not show in the scores sometimes, especially when you're talking about attribution in content marketing, which is even more fun, but it is something that I could not agree more with you on. So, what do you see next in marketing? And the reason I ask is that a lot of people look to the people like you, the other people that I've had on my show, like the Guy Kawasaki's and Martin Lindstroms and Ann Hanley's and Jay Bayers and Joe Polizzi's and Ryan Dice's and Neil Patel's and all these guys that was some name dropping, wasn't it? But one of the things that I do, a lot of people don't get to go to events, and a lot of marketers out there, what I've seen, and it's been part of my own frustration. It's why I do this show as well, is to try to help bring people like you together to help educate other marketers. That's always been important. I like to teach. I like to help other people teach, but I still find a lot of problems today in marketing and wonder where we're going next because of how we need to help elevate what guys like you and other people out there are doing. And I haven't seen quite yet a way that other marketers are learning. That's one of the things that I'm really focused on, is trying to help marketers get better, learn more, make them more amazing. But
I mean, I think that
well, you're a
the
teacher. That's a better way of
process.
setting that up. You're a
Sure,
teacher,
sure.
one of the best out there, and I'd like to know how
Oh, thank you.
you see that.
I mean, there's this interesting challenge, I think, for a lot of teachers, which is that as you upgrade your own skills and learnings, and as you get feedback, usually from the loudest voices in the room, it is very easy to forget that 90% of people that are looking to you for instruction are in the early stages, right? They're beginner level. They need the basics and the fundamentals more so than anything else. And, you know, as a formal teacher, I have a lot of friends who are teachers. In fact, my coworker, Casey Henry, his wife, Lindsay, is a 6th and 7th grade teacher here locally in the Seattle area. And, you know, every year she has these kids come in with the same, roughly the same level of knowledge and lack of knowledge, and each time she has to upgrade their skills in the same ways, right?
Yeah.
And that is very hard, I think, for a lot of us to remember, right? So if you and I get on stage, we have to remember that many of the people in the audience haven't seen what we've seen the last 10, 15 years, and still need those fundamentals before they can, you know, grasp the advanced and expert level content. And at the same time, I think one of the biggest frustrations is the most vocal voices, right? The people who are sending you the, you know, snarky Twitter replies and are in your inbox and fill out the conference feedback forms or tweet about the session or whatever it is. A lot of them are the more advanced marketers who then complain like, this wasn't tactical enough, wasn't actionable enough. And sometimes you have to ignore that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really tough tightrope to walk, right? Is to say like, hang on, I know who this is for. I know who most of the audience is, and I don't want to go over their head. And at the same time, I don't want to give advice that is so bland that it's useless. For example, my least favorite, my pet peeve, I should write a blog post about this, is when someone gives advice about SEO and they say, you've got to create great content.
Yeah.
What the F does that mean?
Yeah.
That is the most useless, meaningless phrase. You just said nothing. I can't tell you how much that bothers me when I hear, especially when I hear Google say it. Oh God, because I know that they know that is useless advice, right? Like, hey, you know, if you create better content, we'll rank you better. Lies, lies, lies. Like, you dirty sons of, just kills me.
But
so,
we eat it
anyway,
up as a culture. It is it's so bad, but it's true.
It is so bad. Yeah.
So what's next for Rand? You know, and I ask this because you have a great new company that will grow.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the product hasn't even launched yet. Who knows if it's going to be great?
That's because this is an evergreen show, and in 2025 when they're reading it, when they're listening to it, they'll say, this was, he knew then. So,
sure he did. But no, he was just as scared as every other entrepreneur out there, just as nervous.
Well, and that's when, it'd be about the time when Russell Wilson's up for his new contract too. But how do you balance as an entrepreneur and as a marketing influencer? You spend a lot of time, you know, speaking. You're considered a major thought leader, one of the, you know, top influencers in all of marketing. That eats up a lot of your time. And at the same time, you got a burgeoning new company that has people that depend on Rand every day for things, you know, whether it's to see out there. But
I mean, I think that I think the key is to tie those two together. right? If you, as an entrepreneur, you want to leverage your strengths and your network and sort of the unique value that you can bring to an organization in positive, brand building ways. And I think that's exactly what my job is right now. While Casey is doing 95% of the product building, I am doing 99% of the marketing and brand building and getting the idea out there and having conversations with folks like you and your listeners about, hey, here's what SparkToro is building. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense to you? Does that excite you? Right? And then hearing from people saying like, yeah, I think I get what you're doing, or no, that doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this other portion of it, just like we did today? And so I think that being a marketing, thought leader, which not exactly the description I love the most, but a teacher, right? Like we talked about. I think that my job is to leverage that teaching to help SparkToro and also to help build a better product for our audience.
Agreed. So, Rand, you are not too far from the cold waters off Puget Sound, so I have to ask, due to the nature of the name of this show being a shark's perspective, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Ooh, favorite kind of shark.
Yeah, did you know there are nearly a dozen sharks in the Sound, which is really interesting. Because the water is so awesome. Cold. They're off, generally deeper because of where the water is and it's colder, but it can be non-Puget Sound sharks.
I mean, I don't think we have any whale sharks, but I've seen some whale sharks in, I think it was in South Africa. And I mean, those are amazing. That's probably my favorite. And they don't eat people.
No.
So that's kind of great too.
Eating krill and
yeah,
baby shrimp. So, well, Rand, is that special time of the show? Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am. I hope there's some conspiracy theory ones in here. I'm so excited for this.
there it is. Number 1, marketer or entrepreneur?
Everyone thinks I'm a marketer. I think I'm an entrepreneur.
Fair enough. Lord of the Rings, Tolstoy's masterpiece, later made into a brilliant series of movies. Or
wait. Not Tolstoy. I'm pretty sure it was Tolkien.
Sorry, Tolkien's masterpiece, which was made. Thank you for my
Tolstoy's masterpiece. I think is War and Peace.
It's War and Peace. It's longer than all the books combined, but Tolkien's masterpiece that was made into movies, or Game of Thrones, HBO's masterpiece by George R.R. Martin.
I mean, I am a Lord of the Rings guy. I love that. Yeah,
all right, good man. Precious.
I mean, I'm fascinated to see what Amazon's going to do with that. That's going to be really interesting.
So, Seattle's best or Starbucks?
Oof. Man, I mean, I'm going to go Seattle's best just because Starbucks is sort of the big monolithic corporation, and I love small businesses. But if you'd give me a choice for Starbucks versus local tiny coffee shop, I would always go local tiny.
Agreed. Number 4, this one you're going to love. Google or Bing? It's sad to think of Bing the redheaded stepchild in search when it's owned by one of the largest companies in the world not too far from you.
Yeah. And Microsoft is doing, outside of Bing, amazing things. Yeah, so I tried switching to Bing and I tried switching to DuckDuckGo, and I have found that Google's privacy invasion is actually really valuable for making search results better.
Yeah. Well, at least you didn't go AOL or Yahoo, but
yeah, right.
Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today, is biscuits or cornbread?
Ooh, we're talking American biscuits, right?
American biscuits.
Yeah, I think I think the very best iteration of a biscuit beats the very best iteration of cornbread, but the average cornbread is better than the average biscuit.
Interesting. Good point. Well, I don't think you go wrong with either, and I don't see you as a guy that's going to a lot of Cracker Barrels, but they give you the choice of both.
I haven't been to a lot of Cracker Barrels, but that's because Seattle area doesn't even have them.
Exactly. Well, that's why I always ask my friends in Manhattan, and none of them Somebody told me
Right.
the other day that he had never had sausage gravy or biscuits with gravy before, and I just
Oh,
thought that was blasphemy. But Rand, where can people find out more about you, follow your thought leadership, and more?
so I blog at SparkToro, sparktoro.com, and I'm most active on Twitter where I'm at Randfish.
Rand, it's been my honor. Thank you very much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Yeah, thrilled to join you. Thanks for having me, Kenneth.
You bet. So there was my conversation with Rand Fishkin, the CEO and co-founder of SparkToro, the previous co-founder of Moz and Inbound.org, who has dedicated his professional life to helping people do better marketing through the Whiteboard Friday video series, his blog, and his book, Lost and Founder, A Painfully Honest Field Guide to the Startup World. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, if you're an entrepreneur today or a soon-to-be, then Lost and Founder is a must-read. It's an excellent book, and as the title says, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. I thoroughly enjoyed it because it's not just full of all the fluffy good stuff only that so many of these books tend to have in them. He said, and I quote, "So few people build companies, especially who build companies and raise capital, who are willing to tell the whole truth." Rand has been a remarkably successful entrepreneur, but even today he's a startup again as an entrepreneur that has to deal with layoffs, depression, potential bankruptcy, hiring and firing, etc. To sum it up, I love this quote: "If I can help make people feel less alone for the challenges that they go through and help them see what this journey is really like," and hopefully the book is also very lesson-based, and hopefully help them avoid making the mistakes that I made, then I think it's a success. Again, no commission, I just think it's a great read. Second, one of the common threads that I find with entrepreneurs is what worked best and worst for them has often been the same thing. And with Rand, it's no different. Looking back at his own career, people and empathy are his best strength and his worst weakness. It's always interesting to me that it comes back to people and rarely to the technology or strategy or something like that. It generally comes down to how we try to get the best out of others to build something. It's a lesson that I've had to learn and continue to learn as well. Third, one of my favorite pastimes every year is to watch the trends to watch lists for the year ahead. I really enjoyed a blog post that Rand wrote that more or less went against a lot of these trends. So be careful when Googling marketing trends or other kinds of trends. But in relation to voice in particular, he brings up a good point. Voice is not the trend, but voice answers is where the actual change is happening. As he said in a paraphrase, telling me that X number of searches occur on voice doesn't say much of anything. Tell me the number that are being answered by voice. For me, it's a reminder to all marketers looking at voice to add some additional focus on your brand. Make it the synonym, if you will, for the term people will use to search. Think Salesforce is the term for searching for CRM, McDonald's instead of hamburger, or Starbucks instead of coffee. And you don't have to be a mega monopoly of a company, for example. You simply have to own that lane, your specific lane, of what you offer that is unique. Help the customer solve that specific problem when they search. It will make your voice search results remarkable. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege, and I appreciate every one of the emails and questions you send me, and I'm so thankful for the reviews. They are needed and appreciated, so keep them coming. So be an amazing marketer, or an amazing entrepreneur, or an amazing anything else. Just be an amazing you, and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.